The War of the Ancients is something that's mentioned quite often in the Warcraft universe, but not many know what it was, how it started, and why it's so important. But in order to get into the deeper details, we need to know about the rise of a race that would play a significant role in the changing of the world. As mentioned before in every episode, this video and the ones preceding it are grouped as an abridgment of the Warcraft Chronicle books. And if this is your first time here, I suggest starting from the beginning, as this video is part of a continuing series. I'll leave a link for you in the description below, but if you're caught up, then let's continue our journey. Before the war between the Trolls and the Akir, we know that many of the tribes clashed against each other due to claims regarding territory, clans such as the Gurubashi and the Amani. But one of these clans, known as the Dark Trolls, had no interest in what other clans wanted. They lived in a network of deep caverns that stretched beneath Mount Hyjal, so you can imagine they didn't care for sunlight. In fact, they only emerged at night. These nocturnal habits would cause a physical change over time, as their blue-hued skin would turn to shades of gray. Dark Trolls cherished their independence. They chose to ignore the activities of the other tribes and focused on creating a peaceful connection to the natural world. Many of the Dark Troll mystics looked for ways to commune with the land and live in harmony with it. Over time, many of these trolls migrated to the center of Kalimdor. And apart from interacting with creatures such as the fairy dragons, chimeras, and dryads, they would soon discover the scintillating lake known as the Well of Eternity. Mesmerized by their discovery, the Dark Trolls settled along the lake's shores. Over generations, the radiating energy from the Well of Eternity would spread throughout the trolls' flesh and skeletal structure, elevating their forms to match their graceful spirits. This transformed them into highly intelligent and immortal beings. With that, these former trolls abandoned their ancient heritage and traditions. The tribe's mystics began worshipping the moon goddess, Elune, who they believed was bound to the Well of Eternity itself, and believed that she slept in the depths of the lake during daylight hours. These former trolls also discovered the name Kalimdor and other Titan-forged words from communing with Elune and investigating artifacts that were scattered around the well's vicinity. Influenced by this new language, they called themselves Kaldori, which meant children of the stars. We know them as Night Elves. The creatures of the land silently watched this new race flourish and whispered news of them to the wild gods of Hyjal, but it was the demigod Cenarius that took a keen interest in them. He adored the Night Elves and saw the potential in them to become great caretakers of nature, and he hoped that the Night Elves would strive to live in harmony with the wilds, especially since it was Cenarius that taught them everything about the natural world. And for many centuries, the Night Elves did just that. Around the Well of Eternity, they built a graceful society. The capital of their small nation was called Elundris, or the Eye of Elune. They strengthened their bonds with the surrounding woodlands and its inhabitants, while Cenarius guided them when necessary. But over time, some of the Night Elves desired a different life, one that dug deeper into the mysteries and powers of the Well of Eternity. As these individuals studied the arcane powers of the lake, they would become sorcerers. Soon, magic became an inseparable part of life as the Night Elves pushed the boundaries of their intellect. In time, it became the driving force of their culture. It was during this time of growth that the Night Elves' most prolific leader came to power. Her name was Queen Azshara. And even though she would elevate her people to extraordinary heights, she would also sow the seeds of their destruction. Queen Azshara was beautiful, wise, and embodied the most coveted traits of her people. While she indulged in sorcerous pursuits, she also constructed a breathtaking palace on the shores of the Well of Eternity. It was there that her most powerful nobles, called the Quel'Dorei, or Highborn, would answer to her every beck and call. Now, the Highborn were very gifted sorcerers as well. Some, such as Lady Vash, served as the queen's handmaiden. Others, such as Lord Xavius, consulted the queen, acting as a trusted advisor. But regardless of the role that these individuals played, the Highborn saw themselves as superior night elves, distinguishing themselves from the lowborn people of their race. But not the queen. No, she didn't subscribe to this ideology. Even though she was born of the highest noble pedigree, the night elves of every social standing adored her. So much that they renamed their capital Zin-Azshari, or the glory to Azshara, in her honor. Under her reign, the night elf civilization blossomed into a sprawling empire. Vast cities, networks of luminescent causeways, all radiated out to the far corners of Kalimdor. The queen even sent expeditionary forces to explore the world and spread the empire's borders. They would bring back samples of exotic flora and fauna, and tales of the mythical dragonflights that ruled the sky. They would also establish outposts, such as Shandaral in the icy northern forests of Moonsong, Thenralor in the lush central wilds, which would later be known as the Barrens, and Eldre Thalas in the southern jungle of Feralus. The queen herself oversaw the building of a temple dedicated to Elune, located in the western edge of Kalimdor. Upon its completion, she named the area Lathar Lazal, or Seat of the Sky. But why is it so important to talk about all these little details? Well, to give you a scale of things, not since the Black Empire in ages past had a group of people grown so vast in size and scope. Azshara's influence over the world and its inhabitants eclipsed even Li Shen's wildest dreams of power. So now, you can kind of get an idea of how big of a deal the Night Elves really were. However, despite their dominance over much of the land, there was one place that Azshara and her forces avoided: Mount Hyjal. The spirits and demigods that roamed there made the queen feel unsettled. Somehow she knew that Hyjal was beyond her influence. Plus, the area, being saturated with ancient magic and untamable, was a land that stood in stark contrast to her vision of a new Kalimdor. She publicly prohibited expansion into Hyjal out of respect for the Night Elves' ancient kinship with the forests. But really, she just despised the mountain and the harmony it represented. And Cenarius knew this. This wasn't a secret to him at all. He had grown increasingly frustrated while watching the new empire spread its wings. Frustrated with the hubris and thoughtless actions of the sorceress Highborn. Now, the majority of the Night Elf society continued to honor the old ways of communing with the wilds, and this warmed Cenarius' heart. But on the surface, he knew that they had no influence over the queen and her arrogant followers. Over time, the Night Elves began ignoring diplomacy and the other cultures of Azeroth. Azshara's dogmatic beliefs regarding racial purity seeped into the Night Elves' psyche, creating an atmosphere rife with xenophobia. The only thing that drew their attention were the hostile troll nations. Small battles would ignite, but on every occasion, the trolls buckled before the devastating magic of the Night Elves. Now, to Azshara, the trolls were but a minor nuisance. Plus, she wasn't interested in conquest, that being the idea of gaining land or dominion via war. She just wanted the trolls to stay out of her way. This is when a deal was made with the Zandalar tribe, which, if you remember, held an immense amount of influence over all the other troll tribes. The deal was this: in exchange for ending troll incursions into Night Elf territory, the Zandalari would be allowed, by the Queen's grace, to keep the sacred mountains south of the Well of Eternity. Knowing that they stood no chance at winning a war against the Night Elves, the Trolls begrudgingly agreed. This agreement would foster the Trolls' deep resentment toward the Night Elves that would last for generations to come. With the Trolls no longer a threat, Azshara continued to expand her dominion. But even as she did so, she remained confined in her palace, obsessing over the Well of Eternity and the arcane secrets held within it, believing that they had only tapped into a small percentage of the lake's power. So, she pushed the Highborn to go farther into the Well Eternity's depths, to expand their knowledge and reach for new heights and technological advancements. But as they conducted these reckless experiments, torrents of magic began to crash through the twisting nether. Like moths to the flame, the nether's demonic inhabitants were drawn toward the irresistible source of power, that being the Well of Eternity. It was only a matter of time before Sargeras and the Burning Legion would take notice. Finally, Sargeras had discovered the location of Azeroth, all thanks to the unsatisfied minds of the Highborn and their queen. While Sargeras gathered all his rage and demonic legions, he turned his gaze upon the distant world. All that remained was to find a way to reach Azeroth. While the Highborn continued experimenting with the Well of Eternity, a young night elf by the name of Malfurion Stormrage dug deep into his connection with nature. Excelling in his studies and under the mentorship of Cenarius, Malfurion became the first mortal druid on Azeroth. Cenarius was pleased with his progress and noticed that something was special about this individual ever since the first time Malfurion's spirit explored the Emerald Dream. It was Cenarius' hope that Malfurion would spread druidism among the Night Elves and help them return to their harmonious roots. But this change for good would not reach Azshara and her followers. Unknown by the greater Night Elf society, the Highborn had begun to communicate with Sargeras. The fallen Titan had looked to use the sorcerers and their magic to expedite the Legion's journey to Azeroth. Without a gateway of some kind, traveling to the world would take ages. Like he had done with the Eridar on Argus, Sargeras reached out to the Highborn. Lord Xavius was the first to hear his call. Being an individual seeking more and more power, he brought this to Azshara's attention. Sargeras' promise was this: he would grant the Night Elf Queen and her servants unfathomable power, thus allowing them to remake Kalimdor into a paradise. His only condition? That Azshara and her followers summon his agents into Azeroth so that they could give the Highborn this power. Blinded by their greed and desire for more power, they used the Well of Eternity's energies to bring the Legion's minions to Azeroth. This is when the blood first began to spill. Waves of demonic warriors flooded out of the Queen's palace, murdering every Night Elf in their path, except for their new Highborn allies. Led by Manaroth the Destructor, Hakar the Houndmaster, and Archimond the Defiler, the Legion blazed through the Night Elf Empire. Cities were shattered. Blazing infernals tore through the skies. In essence, Kalimdor was metaphorically and literally on fire. War, at a level never seen by any mortal empire on Azeroth, was very much present. The War of the Ancients had begun. A Night Elf resistance force led by Lord Kurtalos Ravencrest formed to stand against the Burning Legion. Among his ranks were Malfurion, his sorcerer twin brother Illidan, and the priestess, whom both brothers loved dearly, Tyrande Whisperwind. These three would change the fate of Kalimdor forever. Ravencrest's forces initially suffered many defeats against the invaders, but eventually the Night Elves were able to make some progress. Malfurion was able to unleash his druidic magic upon Xavius within the Emerald Dream, thus striking him down. Not only did his magic destroy one of the Highborn's most powerful sorcerers, but it also provided the incredible potential of druidic magic to Malfurion's allies. How that was done? Chronicles doesn't really say or go into detail, but we can take it for what it is. Illidan became an invaluable asset to the Resistance. During one of the many battles, his arcane magic saved Ravencrest's life. Because of this, Illidan was appointed the commander's personal sorcerer. As for Tyrande, she would emerge as one of the greatest members of the Sisterhood of the Lune. Through her faith in the Moon Goddess, she saved countless innocent night elves from the Legion. In time, she would become the High Priestess of Elune, the revered leader of her sacred sisterhood. Even though the Resistance fought with all their might, more and more demons spilled into Azeroth through the Highborn's portals. More so, the Legion created a new breed of demons, born from the inhabitants of Azeroth itself. The first to come into existence was Xavius. Sargeras had twisted the body of the defeated Highborn into a demonic presence with jagged horns and cloven hooves. This new form became known as a satyr. It would be Xavius who would set out to curse many of his fellow Highborn, transforming them into satyrs as well. Over time, Malfurion realized that the Night Elves could not prevail alone, so he convinced Tyrande and Illidan to accompany him to the tranquil Moonglades near Mount Hyjal. Here, they asked Cenarius for help. He agreed, and rallied the mighty wild gods against the Legion. But this would take time, because they were unpredictable beings and unaccustomed to fighting as one. Unfortunately, time was not a luxury the Night Elves had. While Cenarius gathered the wild gods, Malfurion set his sights on calling the dragon aspects for help. Led by Alexstrasza, they convened at Wyrmrest Temple to discuss their plan. Here, Neltharion, the Earth Warder, proposed a solution, which was this. The aspects would sacrifice a portion of their power into an artifact of his own creation called the Dragon Soul. He claimed that this weapon would scour the Legion from the face of Azeroth. The thing is, the other aspects had no idea that Neltharion had been consumed by the influence of the old gods. Due to their underground prisons being in such close proximity to the bedrock, and the fact that Neltharion was innately tied to the earth, well, it was easy for him to be susceptible to this evil. Over time, and I mean a long time, his descent into torment and madness led him to create the Dragon Soul, which later would be named the Demon Soul. During a battle between the Legion and the Night Elf Resistance, the 5 dragon aspects made their final assault against the demon invasion. And with the power of the Dragon Soul, while working in unison with the other 4 aspects, Neltharion unleashed the full power of the artifact, utterly decimating the Legion. Just as hope began to fill the defenders, Neltharion did something that would forever brand him as an enemy. He turned the Dragon Soul against his own allies, both Night Elf and Dragon alike. This attack nearly murdered all of the Blue Dragon flight and forced the other aspects and Night Elves to flee from the battlefield. Shocked at the sudden betrayal of one who they looked for protection. The Dragon Soul's energy would come at a cost, though. Its powers flooded through Neltharion and began tearing his body apart. Smoldering fissures wrenched out across his scaly hide. From these wounds, geysers of white-hot fire and magma burst forth. With a howl of rage, Neltharion withdrew from the engagement and disappeared into the skies. Even though his attack was short-lived, it had changed the world forever. The unity and power of the Dragonflight had been shattered. They would never be the same again. More so, Malygos, the leader of the Blue Dragonflight, would endure the greatest suffering. Upon seeing the majority of his Dragonflight die, he plummeted into a state of madness with a grief that would linger for thousands and thousands of years. From then on, Neltharion would be known as Deathwing. His actions would curse his own black dragonflight to a life of fear and seclusion, finding themselves hunted by the other flights due to Deathwing's actions. Neltharion wasn't the only one to commit such atrocities. There was another who would begin his journey into darkness, Illidan Stormrage. He had mysteriously vanished from the Night Elf ranks. Many of the members of the Resistance feared for his life because they could not have imagined that he would have just ever abandoned them. Surely, to them, something must have happened. But Illidan's decision to strike out on his own came from his relationship with Malfurion. The sorcerer had always lived in his druidic brother's shadow. Even though the two of them had studied under Cenarius, Illidan never had the patience to master druidism. So, he turned his sights to pursue arcane magic. Throughout the War of the Ancients, he was driven to rise above Malfurion and become a hero for his people. But everything his brother did overshadowed Illidan's actions, including the attempt to win the heart of Tyrande Whisperwind. When he managed the courage to declare his love for her, she rejected him. Illidan took this as a sign that she intended to choose Malfurion as her mate. Rejection, inadequacy as the hero he wanted to be, all of these things built up emotions that led him to welcoming dark thoughts. Beknownst to Illidan, the satyr Xavius was subtly twisting his mind, fanning the flames of his despair. Now, what became of the corrupted Xavius would be a second defeat, though. Malfurion would later vanquish the satyr with the help of a night elf named Shandris Feathermoon, trapping the darkened revived highborn's body and spirit into a gnarled oak tree. Xavius's legacy, however, would persist on Azeroth. To this day, satyrs still roam the world, polluting nature with their foul magics. Over time, Illidan's discontent led him to break from the Resistance. He set out to join the Legion in order to gain unimaginable power, incomparable to any Night Elf in existence. All this to soar higher than his brother Malfurion, and prove to the world that he was capable of greatness. Surprisingly, Illidan secured an audience with Sargeras himself, and revealed his plan to steal the Dragon Soul. This intrigued the Titan leader of the Legion. So pleased was Sargeras that he granted Illidan power. He scarred the Night Elf's body with fell tattoos and burned out his eyes. While excruciatingly painful, this transformation allowed Illidan to see myriad forms of magic. Now, he set out to acquire the destructive artifact created by Neltharion. Upon finding Deathwing, he found the Earth Warder in a ravaged and tormented form. To hold his broken body together, Deathwing had resorted to bolting adamantium plates to his spine. Ultimately, Illidan secured the Dragon Soul and delivered the artifact to the waiting Highborn. It would be used for the next phase of their plans. They would create a massive gateway within the heart of the Well of Eternity, a gateway that Sargeras himself could use to enter the world of Azeroth. Illidan would later claim that his actions were for a noble cause, that he had joined the Legion to learn more about the demons and find a way to destroy them. But this journey to become what he became would only tarnish his reputation forever after. While battles raged across central Kalimdor, one group of Azshara's servants grew concerned for their own future. This small sect of highborn sorcerers were more of an extension of the Queen's will. Located in Suramar, they engaged in covert activities that focused on securing Azshara's rule and strengthening the empire. They also excelled in hunting down and acquiring artifacts of power, which were then stored in the Vault of Antiquities located in Suramar. Among the greatest of these discoveries made by this group were the long-lost Pillars of Creation, relics that the ancient keepers used to shape the world. As the war dragged on, the elite Highborn's views on the Queen began to shift. The group's leader, Grand Magistrix Elisand, feared that the Legion, whom they were in some form of an alliance with, not to have the Highborn's best interests in mind. I mean, the demons had destroyed much of the Night Elves' empire and poisoned the surrounding land with fell magic. What drew the line was when Elisand found out that the Legion was planning on transforming Suramar into a new staging ground for the war. Within the Temple of Elune, a gateway to the Twisting Nether was already being formed. Once completed, this would allow reinforcements to storm into Azeroth, thus crushing the Night Elf resistance on a second front. But Elisand thought that such a portal would likely destroy Suramar, along with everyone who dwelled within. So, a plan to sabotage the Legion's efforts was put into place. This small group severed their ties to the other Highborn and moved to seal the demon's new portal. The Pillars of Creation had the raw power to do so. With the artifacts in hand, Elisand and her group assaulted the demons in Suramar. Just as the new portal was beginning to activate, the sorcerers channeled their magic through the Pillars of Creation. This spell closed it, locking it with a set of unbreakable seals. With their plan completed and their allegiance to the Legion broken, the departed Highborns fortified their holdings in Suramar instead of joining the Night Elf resistance. With the Eye of Aman'Thul, one of the Pillars of Creation, they created an immense fount of arcane magic known as the Night Well. This would protect them from future threats as well as nourish the sorcerers. In time, it would change Elisand and her allies, transforming them into a new race called the Nightborn. Even though there had been countless defeats, hope still lingered among the Night Elf resistance. A new leader by the name of Jared Shadowsong had assumed the mantle of command. Unlike his predecessors, he was not born of noble blood. As the great strategist that he was, he stripped away the Night Elf's Xenomorphia and invited many of Azeroth's other races to join the resistance. Races like the Earthen, Tauren, and Furbolgs. They also found allies among the Highborn enemies. A group of sorcerers led by Dathramar Sunstrider. He had realized that the Legion would only bring ruin to Azeroth and thus abandoned Azshara, pledging their lives to the resistance. Even the wild gods had finally showed up to the fight. It said that the forest trembled as they marched down from the slopes of Hyjal. With them came the woodland dryads, the many-headed chimeras, and even the mighty tree folk known as the Treants showed up to fight the demons. Under Shadowsong's command, the combined army launched a desperate assault against Zin-Azshari itself. The resistance clashed against the seemingly numberless ranks of the Legion. The cost was horrific. Thousands upon thousands fell from both sides. Even some of the wild gods met their demise as they were met with the poisoned black blades and fell powers wielded by the demons. With each death of a wild god, the forest atop Hyjal shivered, and the winds howled in sorrow. As the battle raged on, Malfurion and Tyrande journeyed to the Well of Eternity's shores with a small elite force. Their goal was to reclaim the Dragon Soul so that the Legion could not use its powers. This is when Malfurion was reunited with Illidan, who claimed that his allegiance to the Highborn and the Legion was a ruse to learn their ways. While suspicious about his brother, something else caught his attention, something that looked to be a bigger threat. The Well of Eternity had become a colossal portal, a direct gateway for Sargeras himself to enter Azeroth. It was then that Malfurion realized that no standing army could withstand the might of Sargeras. The only way for victory to be achieved was by destroying the Well of Eternity itself. While unthinkable, the Well had become the Legion's link to the physical world. Destroying the Well of Eternity would be the end of the Night Elf civilization, but it was also the only chance to save the world. After reclaiming the Dragon Soul, Malfurion and his companions infiltrated the Queen's palace to find many of the Highborn in the midst of strengthening the portal within the Well of Eternity by weaving a spell. To throw their magic out of alignment, Malfurion used the Dragon Soul and lashed out at his enemies. He conjured a great storm that battered the city and decimated the Highborn and demons within. As Sargeras prepared to emerge from the portal, the unraveled spell from the Highborn released a vortex of arcane energies within the Well of Eternity. The fount buckled in upon itself. In that moment, Sargeras was ripped back into the twisting nether. Volatile energies whipped out of the collapsing Well of Eternity, sending most of the Legion's ranks back into the nether as well. Then, the earthquakes began erupting on the face of Azeroth. The Night Elves scrambled to put distance between themselves and the Well of Eternity. Upon fully collapsing, the well ignited a cataclysmic explosion, blotting out the skies while the ocean surged in to fill the void left by the explosion, devouring the ruins of Zin-Azshari. When all was said and done, and the earthquakes had calmed, the surviving Night Elves saw that their world had been torn asunder. The Well of Eternity's destruction had shattered nearly 80% of Kalimdor's landmass, leaving only a handful of separate continents. What was left in the former well's location was a storm of energies known as the Maelstrom. It would stand as a reminder to the terrible cost of the war. For the Night Elves and all other living creatures on Azeroth, the world had changed forever. But what about Queen Azshara? Surely she died with the destruction of her city. Well, no. Surprisingly, she and many of her loyal Highborn survived the Sundering, but not without consequences. They were sucked into the fathomless depths of the Maelstrom. Some were cursed and warped into a new and hateful race called the Naga. One of the most powerful among them was the Queen's former handmaiden, Lady Vash. Hidden from all, she and Azshara would build the Naga capital of Nazjatar in the cold darkness at the bottom of the sea. And for those of you who like to play the well actually card, yes, it was N'Zoth that she made a deal with in order to save her people. But the Chronicle book that we're working on doesn't talk about that. Even though that it's canon and that's what happened, we're just trying to keep it simple by staying true to what the book says. I figure that all of this after knowledge can be added in later videos down the line. Think of them as addendum videos, but we're very far from that as of right now. The Sundering decimated life across the face of Azeroth, except for one region, Pandaria. For centuries, a succession of peaceful emperors had ruled over the land. Prior to the invasion of the Legion, a Pandaren ruler by the name of Shaohao would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Pandaria's history. It was tradition for new emperors to consult with the Jinyu water speaker to glean the knowledge of what the future held. What Shaohao saw was the events that we just recently talked about, the invasion of the Burning Legion. Knowing this, the Emperor looked to the August Celestials and his friend the Monkey King in order to make sense of the future he saw. With their help, the Emperor was able to expel the dark emotions that troubled him: doubt, despair, fear, anger, hatred, and violence. These negative traits, having been expunged, would take on a physical form: powerful entities known as the Shah. Shaohao would use his wisdom to battle the Shah and lock them away deep beneath Pandaria, where they would remain, festering beneath the earth. The only emotion that he would never be able to expel would be pride. That emotion would silently lurk in Pandaria for thousands of years. But in order to watch over their imprisonment, the Emperor created an elite order of Pandarian soldiers called the Shadowpan. Now that these emotions were taken care of, the Emperor set out to save Pandaria from the Sundering that was to come. In order to do so, he would separate his land from the rest of Kalimdor. This attempt would be accomplished in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and although he tried to focus his powers to sever his empire from the rest of Kalimdor, he couldn't do it. This led to his fear and doubts returning, and the Shah began to stir to life underground, feasting on the Emperor's uncertainties. As the Legion's fell magic set the skies ablaze, Shaohao called to the wisest of the August Celestials, the Jade Serpent. She told him that Pandaria was more than just his empire. Everything in Pandaria was connected. Everything in Pandaria was one. Finally, the Emperor understood. To save his land and his people, he would need to become one with it. With his mind clear and his heart set on the task ahead, Shaohao merged his spirit with the land itself and forced it to break away from the rest of Kalimdor. His very essence shrouded Pandaria in a thick mist that would hide it from the outside world, protecting it from the terrible Sundering. For the next 10,000 years, Pandaria would remain hidden, eventually fading into legend. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support the work I'm doing, you can check out my YouTube, Patreon, or even my Twitch memberships. And a big shout out to the members on the screen here. You guys have done so much for the channel, and I really do appreciate your support. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time on the Tales of Azeroth.